Okay, so we're going to keep the party going, and we're going to welcome Scott Thurm from the Wall Street Journal to come up and host a panel and talk about how to scale customer success to millions of customers in big companies. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. As you heard, this panel is going to be about scaling success, and you have to forgive me, but to introduce the other panelists, I'm going to have to borrow the list that's on my phone here. So I'm going to be joined, you guys can come up as I call you, by Dan Shapiro, who's GM at LinkedIn, by John Pereira from Adobe's EchoSign division, by Leila Seca of Salesforce, and by Ross Piper of Dropbox. Hi. So please welcome them. Now, as I understand the MO here, each of you are going to have a little presentation for 5 or 6 minutes, so why don't we just go in the order that you sat down? Would that be this? And Dan, why don't you go first, and then we'll chat among ourselves, and then we'll invite everybody else to join our conversation.
Great. Do we have slides? That's me. Great. Pleasure to see everyone here. How many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Thank you. I appreciate your business. But what you may not know is that LinkedIn has a very grand aspiration to create the world's first economic graph, the first digital representation of every bit of the global economy and how it comes together. Every professional, every company, every skill, every job opportunity, every school, every piece of professional knowledge. And so at our heart, we're a data company. And since the founding of the company back in 2003, we've thought about a myriad of ways of bringing value to our members by taking all of that data and making people's lives more professionally productive. Now, about 3 years ago, we had an epiphany, which is that we've thought extensively about our data in the context of our members, but we've actually never thought about data in the context of our customers, our enterprise customers. And I run a business where we serve about 25,000 companies around the world, helping them recruit and hire great people. And so the question became, how do we rethink the way that we do business to take advantage of all of this wealth of data that we have at our fingertips? And so I had the chance to go in front of the board and present to them a vision, which I'll share with you, which has really guided our strategy for the last several years to where we are today. And it's actually very much in line with some of the themes that Nick talked about on stage, about how he sees the future of Gainsight. And it came back to a simple analogy. Historically, we've had 2 ways of working with customers. And there's an analogy to fighting crime here. First way is 911. Someone's got a problem. It is such an extreme problem that they need to call someone right now to have it resolved. And the other is what I would call a beat cop, where you're kind of wandering the streets looking for trouble. It's Monday. It's the first of the month. Let me start calling my list. And what you realize when you step back from this problem is that we have an information challenge. At the end of the day, our ability to serve customers well is predicated upon understanding what they're going through right now. And if you could imagine a world where you had perfect transparency into your customer environment, you would act completely differently. You wouldn't wander the streets looking for trouble. You would know where trouble was. You would figure out what was going on, figure out who should reach out to them, and take care of their needs. Because the truth is that most customers with challenges never call us. It's not high enough in their bar to reach out to 911, and the chances that you happen to wander upon them in the midst of their issue is basically zero. You have way too many customers to deal with way too many needs to be able to satisfy them at that level. And so we had to think about, well, what is the model? And we believe that the model is Batman. Batman is my favorite crime fighter. And if you know anything about Batman, he's actually not a superhero. He has no powers that are beyond being human. He's incredibly motivated, incredibly suave. And he lives in a big house, and he sits in his chair, and he drinks martinis and smokes cigars and has an amazing life until what happens? The bat signal. The bat signal is the greatest crime-fighting device in history. It essentially scours the world for things going wrong, and Batman can hang out until it goes off. And then he jumps in his Batmobile, races to the scene of the crime, and saves the day. Because he has a trigger that can guide him to the point in the world where problems are happening. He doesn't have to wait for someone to call him. He doesn't have to wander the streets waiting for crime to happen to him. He knows where it's happening. And so we started asking ourselves the question, what bat signals could we set up in our business so that we could know what's going on in our customers, so that we could react to them and not live on a calendar month to month, but to respond to triggers as they happen? I'll give you a couple examples. All our data says that the first 90 days as a customer is everything. Does anyone have that experience looking at onboarding? Basically, by day 90, we know if you're going to churn or not. Your behavior pattern is fairly well set. If you haven't run that analysis, go run it. It's going to be mind-boggling. You're going to be able to predict who's likely to churn at 12 months based on where they are at month 3. How do we start pulling out what behaviors do we need to see at day 7, 14, 30, and 90 to reach out to people to help them solve the problems and get on board correctly? That's a trigger. That integrates directly into our software that our sales reps see every day. Another thing is, what happens when people leave companies? We have LinkedIn profile data. We know when our customers are switching jobs. We know that a decision maker leaves. We know when a new one comes in. Let's call the new one and say, can we help? Or you understand our product? You understand our value proposition? If you've been a customer and you go to some place that's not a customer, let's call you as well. Hey, new job. Let's help you out. We're LinkedIn. And so we've thought about how do we evolve from a model where we're living like this to a model where we're living like this. Because the truth is that Batman is effective because he's able to apply all of his energy, all of his resource, and all of his capability when it's needed, where it's needed, which allows him to create so much more good for the people of Gotham City than he ever could do if he was wandering the streets. That's what we're trying to do. And I think what's inspiring is the theme of trigger-based customer success is at the heart of what I believe is the next generation. And I think many companies in this room are starting to play with that and starting to see success. Thank you.
Just go. Thanks very much, John. The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. Am I alive? This is a test. We had a joke backstage that none of you knew who really any of us were, and so we were going to potentially just swap roles and deliver each other's slides. And I got to say, I could not have delivered that. Batman, let me tell you about that. So
now comes the Green Hornet, right?
That's right. So I look after Adobe EchoSign. It's an electronic signature service run by Adobe. Most of what the world signs electronically are PDFs. And so it was just a really logical thing for the company to acquire Adobe about 1.5 years ago. And fundamentally, we're in the business of helping people stop do stupid things. We were also joking backstage about the movie The Office. How many people have seen The Office? So you remember where they throw the fax machine out and they sort of hammer on top of it, and you talk about TPS reports. It turns out that something like 98% of all US companies today are still using paper to get things signed. So we've modernized every single thing that we have in our business. We've SaaSified it, we know who our customers are, we're Gainsighting it, yada, yada. But when it comes time to have a critical sort of transaction completed, we're saying, okay, go find a fax machine, or FedEx or UPS, and just overnight that. And what happens is that you introduce friction into the business, and you're giving your competitor time to come in and get something signed in the meantime. So what we're doing with electronic signatures is helping people save money. United Healthcare, one of our clients, saved $166,000 in their very first year in paper costs alone by using Adobe EchoSign. And in terms of the time it takes to sign a contract, we're seeing in general a 90% decrease. And by the way, most people don't think that stuff that's signed on paper is secure. So 67% of all US organizations think that contracts that are signed on paper are prone to defacing. If you ask a lawyer this question, the number is dramatically worse. So we're about helping people stop doing stupid stuff. Let's get electronic. Let's build a cloud-based service that integrates seamlessly with things like Salesforce and Dropbox and all of these other systems, and just helps people get their job done electronically, take the friction out of the business. Now, certainly what we do is we get signatures from millions of people around the world every day. But much more importantly than that, we're about business process automation. We're about taking a business process and saying, what's a much better way to do this? And how does sort of your digital document strategy align to that? You know, just anecdotally last week, And on the theme of customer success, which is what I think we're here for, we had a customer advisory panel, and we thought we knew what the topics were going to be. We thought what the customers are going to complain about or their recommendations for the product were going to be X, Y, and Z. The number one thing that our customers asked us for was about best practices across the industry. We've got organizations that span healthcare, financial services, high tech, and what customers wanted to know is, what's my peer group doing in terms of business process that's best in practice that I can borrow from? And one of the lights that went off for us is that the job of the client success manager, and the thing that you have to do at scale for millions and millions of customers, is collect that data, share that data so that other companies can benefit from what your customers, other customers and organizations are doing. So we're now in the business, I think, and the role of client success has sort of changed for us. Like on the one hand, it's retention, it's driving upsell. But what we're thinking about now is the job now is spreading best practices across our customer base. And it's doing it at scale. I just took over the EchoSign business a year ago, and one of my first questions was, who are our largest customers? What's their TCV? And then what's their NPS, and just sort it by who's red to green based to their TCV. And the team got out a set of spreadsheets and pencils and paper and said, like we couldn't do it. I mean, it was just an old way. And so we're scaling a business up from thousands of customers to millions of customers, and it's a very difficult transition. And one of the things that Nick suggests that I do is just say, hey, what are some lessons learned along the way? We are a business inside of Adobe that's like a startup. We're like sort of the Boston whaler in the fleet out in the harbor so we can go fast and do our own things. We're taking the company along with us into the world of SaaS. And some of the things that we're learning, first of all, is that we have to look really, really carefully at the end-to-end customer experience. We had 5 or 6 different teams own everything from the marketing and demand gen and lead qual. Had another team that owned e-commerce. We had other teams that owned onboarding. The product team for the SaaS business thought that the product was the thing that happened when you buy it to when you get on board and start using it. Then we have a client success team and a support team. And we've changed the whole paradigm of that. We've said that the product is the client success, is the marketing, is the experience. We need one brand, one user experience, one set of business processes, in particular, one set of technologies across all of that, so that we can measure people moving through not the funnel, as Nick said earlier, but through the customer lifetime journey. And so that's been a big upgrade to go from spreadsheets and pencils to an integrated end-to-end system across the board. Systems are really critical. The first year or 6 months that I was on the EchoSign business, we ran a SaaS service that went down monthly. And what people are doing with electronic signatures is closing multi-million-dollar deals or offer letters. So that was pretty unacceptable. And I think one of the biggest business challenges that I had to do as I ran the engineering group, or still do, was to say, look, we're not on the right platform. We have to get to the new platform. So we spent 9 months and a lot of engineering expertise to focus not on net new feature innovation, but on building the right long-term platform for growth. So that meant our competitors are out there pushing new features, and we're sort of trenching in and building the foundation for the future. The good news is that's paying off. The last 7 months, we've had 5 months with 100% system uptime, which is now #1 in the e-signature industry. And we've gone from things like spreadsheets to things like Gainsight that allow us to do predictive analytics and modeling around where our customers are going. So I would say invest now in the core systems. Don't kick the can down the road. It is too painful. And the longer growth is ahead once you get on the new platform. And then finally, it's about making sure you've got the right people on the bus. It's really funny. Most of the client success team that we have now for Adobe EchoSign has been in the client success world for 10, 11, 12 years. They were the pioneers with Salesforce and WebEx and other types of companies. And regardless of what stage of the business you're at, one of the things that's really easy is that if you're a $0 to $10 million company, there's a certain kind of talent that you need that's going to make that business go. If you're going from 50 to 100 million in revenue, that's a different kind of talent. It's a different set of skills that you need. Not better, not worse. It's just different. If you're going from 500 million to 1 billion, it's different again. And what you have to do is make sure that you are right-sizing the talent based to the size of your growth of your business, and making sure that the customer experience is really front and center at each and every step along the way. So that's a little bit about EchoSign and a little bit about some of our lessons learned. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna have you go next. I'm gonna have you go next because I've got you on there.
Your face is up there. I don't
Yeah, right.
I have more hair than you, Ross.
They seem to think that Ross is next, so if Layla gets up, it's not going to look right.
I can get up with you, Ross.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll just be a little Salesforce.
We'll let Ross go next.
Having worked at Salesforce for 6 years, I can certainly do Layla's part.
I don't know, Ross. I don't know.
So thanks for having us here. I'll be pretty quick. The fascinating thing about Dropbox, I joined Dropbox last July, and when you think about customer success for Dropbox, it starts entirely with the product and the experience. And Dropbox was founded because Drew Houston, who was one of our co-founders, left the wrong files at home when he was trying to go from Boston to New York. And he knew that the world of us having to ship and send and share and do all this stuff to get files to the right devices was just too painful. And he started at trying to solve this fundamental painful problem, wrote the lines of code on the bus drive that were the first aspects of the Dropbox service. And that is what Dropbox is about. It is trying to find these really hard computing problems that make people's lives simpler. And it's through that the service has grown up. So I'll take from Dan of what he did with you before. How many of you use Dropbox? I think there are about 5 more Dropboxers than LinkedIn users. I just did a quick count. So that simple premise has grown Dropbox to over 275 million users in 7 years. And everything we do goes back into focusing on the product and trying to make that experience as simple as possible, trying to solve some of the biggest pains that people have with dealing with technology across devices, across mobile, across different applications. And that is really what drives everything about Dropbox. And the things that we think about are, what is the meaningful impact that it's having to users? So we do a lot to measure that, to work with users through surveys, through engagement, through ongoing conversations. And then we work really hard on trying to make things simple. And one of the stats that we love for our business customers is we did a survey of how many of them use some type of training when they use us or even some of our competitors. 80% of the users use no training. And 10% of those who do use training, Scott doesn't? No training or
no
training? No training. And 10% of the people who did do training did it because they had to work through some of the company compliance issues. It had nothing to do with the underlying product. So I think one of the things that we've really seen is that focus on simplicity, solving a fundamental problem for people, and focusing on solving it in as simple and as easy to use way as possible really drives incredible viral customer success. And those 275 million users have brought us into over 4 million businesses. And then as we build our enterprise business, we're kind of marrying that incredible viral user-driven piece with working with CIOs and admins, CTOs, to solve what they need for their company. We've got companies like National Geographic, which you think about the use case, it's natural for all of these reporters and photographers around the world to need to be able to collaborate with the publishing house in DC. And they had no easy means to do that. They actually shipped CDs and DVDs for some of their bigger things. And they standardized on Dropbox across their organization so that they could get into a much more real-time collaboration between the people in the field and the core office. And it has changed the way they do publishing. They can actually, instead of taking 400 shots, hoping that one works, they can take 10, interact with the front office or the headquarters, and find out what are the things they could do differently, take the next 10 or 20, and be done. And those are the type of things we're seeing change. But it all comes back to the feedback we get from our largest customers through our user operations organization. Everything keeps funneling back into trying to make the product a little bit better every time. I think that is really the key for us around customer success.
All right. Oh. Here we go. Hi, I'm Layla Seka. Isn't this a silly word? Intrapreneur. All right, so I now work and I have teams of people that bring me good ideas, and one person on my team named Kate Merkin brought me this And I thought, this isn't a real word. This is ridiculous. I don't know what you're talking about. But this is what I do. So a lot of my friends all run around and say they're entrepreneurs. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm risk averse. I'm an intrapreneur. I stand on the shoulders of giants and innovate for small business. I'm a lucky person. I've been at Salesforce for 6 years. That's why I was making fun of Ross. And I ran the App Exchange for the first 6 years. So I took it from almost nothing to what it is today, which a lot of you have probably interacted with it. All of you have interacted with it. It's a pretty awesome ecosystem of enterprise class apps that are around the Salesforce and are available to all these businesses to do stuff. Now, I've taken on a new challenge at Salesforce, and I run Desk.com. So Desk.com is all about customer support. And I think everyone's talked about it a bit today, but I'm going to take it in a slightly different vein. So you guys know who Salesforce is. If you don't, just look at a building in this city and you'll probably see our logo somewhere. But we take this very seriously. And this is why we have been so unbelievably successful time and time again, year after year. The customer is the key to Salesforce. It always has been. And the interaction with them is critical. So figuring out ways to interact with customers in a scalable fashion is incredibly important. So when I think about what that means and what we do, this is where Desk comes in really, really well. Desk is a very fast product to get up and running, because the reality is these days, customer support isn't one person's job. If you are really, really innovating and you're a small company that's taking this seriously, everyone is involved in customer support, from the CEO all the way down. This notion of whole company support that we've been talking about at Desk for the last year is really, really important, because it gives everyone access to what the customer's saying. Like, if you think about it, if you go to the 911, I mean, how many times am I annoyed by something but don't want to be bothered to call or write an email to figure out how to fix it, right? That's a very natural thing. But when someone actually takes the time to write to you and tell you, this thing bothered me, it's very, very powerful for your whole organization to see that, most specifically your product teams. I was with a customer the other day of Desk, and he was telling me that his entire product strategy is based on the labels in Desk. Like, how many times he sees an issue coming in from customers in Desk is informing what he's telling his product team to build. Now you are cooking, right? Now you're cooking with gas. You actually are attached into what's really going on in the customer base, and your product people are seeing it. Your sales people know it. Everyone's involved in the support process, because just hiring some smart people to sit on the phones, whether they've been doing it for 10 years or for 3 years, that's too much burden. Everyone has to carry the burden of supporting the customer, and that's what tools like Desk and other tools in the market help people do very effectively and very fast. So on this notion, this is Desk, by the way. I made them all wear white because I like to throw white parties. The notion is that all of these people are responsible for every single customer that goes into trial on Desk. And that's the level of responsibility we try to make inside the organization, with the support of Salesforce as well, but we take it very seriously. So the bulk of my slides really focus on the human interaction, because although we want to be speedy and fast, and Desk allows you to do things like have a blowfish effect, where you can look very big, you can be a 5-person company, but you can respond on Twitter, on Facebook, all over in cases, and feel much bigger to your client. We let you do that, but we also do something important, which is connect the person to the person. People want to talk to a person when they're upset often. And that talk can happen on Twitter, it can happen on email, it can happen on the phone. But making sure that that connection occurs is an important part of your strategy. And you can't be on 24/7, I get that. But decide when you're going to be on and be on there. Let your customers know what they can expect and make sure you deliver back on it. And then always make sure you're looking forward, right? Do I have the right people? Am I pursuing the right goals? Do I have the right things in order? Am I moving in the right direction? Is my team knowledgeable about this? Am I focusing on the customer? I mean, these days, everyone creates a product roadmap, right? Like, every company in the world creates a product roadmap. The smart companies are creating a service roadmap to go next to their product roadmap. So here's an anecdote. We have a company called Squarespace. They're a client of ours. They don't close cases. Right, which is insane. I was like, why don't you close cases? You have to close cases. No, we don't want the customer to ever feel like we're closing down the conversation with them. This is the new way people are starting to think about how they provide service to their customers. The dialogue is open. We're engaged. I don't ever want you to feel like I'm closing the door on you. I don't ever want you to feel like the conversation is over. Conversation is open, and I'm here to listen to you. And that's a company that's done a very good job of differentiating on customer service. So, like, these new trends, this idea that your SLA is your value proposition, these are real pertinent things that all small companies should take a hard look at. And Desk can help you do it.
Okay, We want to start a conversation now, and mostly to be a conversation with you all, but just to get it going while I assume they're going to be distributing mics and so forth, I'll prime the pump a little bit. Dan, I spend my day, asking reporters to give me more specifics. So give me a couple of specifics of what tips you off at 90 days of whether somebody's going to stay or not.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that everything starts with when you deploy software across a team, do you have the basic usage patterns in place? I think everyone probably knows for their product, there's a couple core things that if people get that right, then there's so much more that they can get from the product over time. If that doesn't happen, they're off the rails early and they never get back on. I think most time when a customer, think about it, like when you buy a product for yourself, and who's gone to Best Buy or someplace, bought a product, take it home, try to set it up, doesn't quite work the first time, they put it aside, half the time they never come back and figure out actually how to do it correctly. And so we've found that there are a fairly specific set of activities that if they go right in that period, go incredibly well, and if they don't, then we're kind of off the rails from the beginning and we typically don't get them back. So one of the things that we've done is every new user gets a phone call from our support team within the first 7 days to help someone do 3 things in the product that we think set them up for success down the road. And then what we've done is we've wired an onboarding score directly in our back-end system so that the rep knows how that customer is performing at those milestones, and if they're not performing well, to reach out and try to help them get back on track.
Okay. Ross, another issue I imagine is prevalent out there is you guys sort of jumping from a consumer-based business to a lot of your business now enterprise, National Geographic. We use it some at the Wall Street Journal. So talk a little bit about how that changed the game for Dropbox and changed the game for what you do there.
Yeah. So Dropbox was founded for work to begin with. That first use case was a work one. So it's always been at the heart of making individual people productive. And I think the company, we really started to try to focus on user by user by user to prove that we could have that kind of an impact. Because if you try to build at the start from the top down, you're subject to trying to design based on management beliefs or processes or things like that, and you never get to the end users. So by starting to the end users, we knew we could deliver and learn from them person by person by person, build more and more value to them. And by the time we got into the hundreds of millions of users, that's when we started to build the enterprise features so that we could give CIOs, CTOs, CISOs the controls to make sure that they felt like they were protecting their data and could protect company assets at the same time. But you have to build for those users first. And I think there are companies who try to build from the top down in kind of our space, and that it's really hard to then earn the user's trust and to provide an experience that's really meaningful to them. But by focusing on the users first and then layering on management controls and visibility and things like that, we know we can try to preserve that user experience, yet add the additional values that enterprises need.
Okay, thank you both. The clock is ticking relentlessly here. I see a question right in front, so you win.
So we have enterprise customers as well as very, very, very small SMBs. And for enterprise customers, it's a very simple blocking and tackling to do proactive account management. You have a cadence, you have a QBR, whatever. But what I always struggle with is how do you, for thousands of SMB customers, in a cost-effective way, make them feel like they're getting proactive. Like I've got reactive dialed. It's much more, how do you make them feel like they're getting that high touch?
I'll take a stab at that, and I'm sure others have a stab at that as well. I'm a big fan, and this won't be the answer you're probably looking for, which is to say the software has to do it. Right? There's no way that if you have 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, 100 people, that you're going to adequately serve the long tail of tens of thousands of the small customers. So the software, you have to innovate. It's got to pop up and say, hey, I noticed you had a problem. We can do something to help you. I love that Evernote, for example, says, here are the 5 things to get up and running really quickly. And it keeps track of me and what I've done. Dropbox does the same thing. And I think one of the big answers here is software innovation. The one thing that we are doing just on our team is we have office hours. And so any SMB customer in the world can sign up for office hours. I think it's Tuesdays and Thursdays from 12 until 2, where you can talk with a live person. We're going to troubleshoot. We're going to do best practices. And so we're not everywhere, but we have that time where people know that they can connect with us.
Anybody else want to weigh in, or should we take another?
I think you got it. And what you don't have to answer, don't answer. Use a macro. Don't over-engineer it. If it's how do I reset my password, pound, off you go. Don't make it too hard.
When we call, you have to answer. It's hard to see with lights. I see somebody in the third row there, right next to the mic there.
Yesterday, we heard from quite a few of the panelists that the CSMs were not sort of subject matter experts on the product. But I'm kind of wondering how each of you feel about that as well. Does the customer success manager need to be a subject matter expert in the product in order to help drive that success? And in your scenario exactly, where you were talking about different skill sets based on different tiers of client, do you grow that customer service success person through those tiers or not?
That feels like it was addressed directly to me, the second part of that. We actually, historically, if you want to be a CSM on the Adobe EchoSign team, we require that you install Salesforce using a developer account. We require that you then integrate EchoSign into it, and then come back to us and tell us about the experience. And so there's this level of product expertise that we've historically required. What we're starting to hear more, though, is what I was intimating about earlier, which is that our customers want to know about what are the best practices. And so we're trying to start to shift the role of the CSM away from being the product expert towards being more of a consultative, here's the business value that we can drive for you based on what we're seeing others do in the industry. And I think as you go through the stages, we're going to be more and more the latter.
Yeah, I would say that we adopt a fairly tiered approach. So we have everything from our SMB clients all the way up to our largest clients. And we have a fairly large scale. Smallest clients spend about $5,000 a year with us. Largest clients, $5 million. And so we need to find a model that works in all those ranges. At the low end, it's much more predictive and reactive. So when do we think someone's in need, we'll reach out, but there's no scheduled there's no expectation set with the customer that someone's watching them, but we are watching them. That's a much more transactional mindset where the person is essentially helping someone get through some real problem in the moment. At the highest end, our expectation is that our CSMs, and we don't quite call them that, but that they could run the recruiting organizations of our biggest clients someday. Like, I would expect that in 5 years, some of our best people will be big customers at big clients. And they are the most trusted advisor at those organizations to help them not just make the right use of the product they've bought, but to guide the whole strategy for how they do business. And so we hire with that in mind. But again, that's only a model that I believe scales with, in our case, probably the top 250 clients we have around the world.
Yeah, we have a similar tiering. Our user ops team, but they're all product experts. Our user ops team is some of the best product experts in our company, and they need to know it back and forth. And they're handling and working user by user at any issues they have. And then for the larger accounts, we have account management team, which is actually paired with our solutions architects to give you a sense of the technical depth that we expect in those resources.
Well, I feel like we're just getting going, but unfortunately the clock says we're done. So thank you all for sharing your insights.